It's April 26th, 2021, Abhayagiri Monastery, and we're just audio recording. We're not doing live stream, so I can do this like we used to. We're keeping the lights on bright solely for the sake of the live stream. When we first started those live streams last year, we would turn the lights off and then people started complaining all they could see was two glowing orbs behind us, and everything else was indistinct. Sometimes when we're trying to find some way or some angle to talk about the Dhamma, it's not so easy to get started because no words can really touch it. So just sitting here silently, listening to the sound of the wind and the crickets and the scare tape that we've set up to keep the woodpeckers from pecking the building. It's been very successful. But the slightly minor drawback of that is that crackling sound that will be there all the time, but it's worth it. One of the recollections that is done more in the Tibetan tradition, but it's also implied and done in the Theravada, is the contemplation of the optimum human rebirth, that it's rare to be reborn as a human being in samsara. So in the round of transmigration, the round of rebirths and redeaths, and to take form as a human being is rare, and so we're taught to make the most of it, the time that we have. We don't know when we will die, so there's these two different contemplations that are linked. There's the contemplation of the optimum human rebirth that we have all gained, and there's the contemplation of death, which is inevitable. And it's taught that when we contemplate the optimum human rebirth, we will involuntarily feel joy. And when we contemplate death, we'll involuntarily feel some sadness. And that's very natural to feel those things. The way things work and the way the mind works, there's these default reactions of the mind. So, for example, when there's an unpleasant feeling, the default reaction is aversion in the mind. It's almost automatic. And when there's pleasant feeling, the default reaction is attachment, clinging, and it's almost automatic. And mindfulness is when we start to see that and become aware of it. So we want to use the Optimum Human Rebirth for that, and we don't know how long we have, whether it's 1 more hour, 1 more day, 1 more month, 1 more year, 10 more years, we don't know. So the contemplation of the Optimum Human Rebirth is that like the simile of the turtle, that there's a blind turtle that lives in a vast ocean and surfaces once every 100 years. And there's a little yoke, a little circular floaty object on the surface of that vast ocean, randomly blown about. And the turtle surfaces once every 100 years on this vast ocean at a random location, and the yoke is at a random location. And is it possible that the turtle would by chance surface after 100 years and put its head through that small ring floating in the ocean? Yes, it is theoretically possible, but highly unlikely and wouldn't happen for a very, very, very long time. And so that's the analogy given, that if we are to die and fall into the lower realms, that's how unlikely it is that we will gain the human rebirth again. So making the best use of this time is very, very important. And the death contemplation is kind of linked with it, because to make use of the optimum human rebirth, we have to realize just how fleeting this life really is. So there's 2 parts to the death contemplation. One is the certainty aspect, and the other is the uncertainty aspect. So the certainty aspect is we can be certain that we will die. That's the certainty part of it. It's absolutely 100% certain that we will die at some point. And there's no science or medicine or anything else that can stop that, or maybe delay it. And it's absolutely uncertain, so this is the uncertainty aspect, it's absolutely uncertain when we will die. So we may have had some sort of premonition when we might die, or a fortune teller, or even a Kruba Ajahn may have told us when it's likely we'll die, but we really don't know for sure. So it's an uncertainty. But even if we live out a full human lifespan of 100 years or a little more, in the big scheme of things, it's not that long. So we really do need to make the best use of that time. That's really what got me to the monastery and kept me here. Anytime I wanted to leave, anytime I wanted to disrobe, that death contemplation came up really strong. Well, how unfortunate would that be if I was disrobed and drove out the exit of the monastery and died in a car accident? It could totally happen. So, might as well stay. So the death contemplation is important too, because it really cuts through these hopes of the future, thoughts of the future, and just brings us back to that cultivation of mindfulness in the present. And that's the intended purpose of the death contemplation is to come back into the present and cut off those thoughts and hopes and longings of projecting ourselves into the future. So that's the hoped for consequence of the death contemplation, or the intended consequence, and then come back to present moment awareness, present moment clarity. If we start feeling depressed or morose, then it's good to ease off the death contemplation and stop doing it for the time being. Just maybe focus on the fact of the optimum human rebirth more for a while. So, and we can also think of how incredibly rare it is not only to be reborn as a human being, but to be reborn as a human being in the time when a Buddha's dispensation actually is in existence. So we haven't been fortunate enough to have the Buddha alive right now, but we have taken rebirth during the time of a Buddha's dispensation, and that's very special. Even if it's 2,564 years according to our calendars. It's not that long in the big scheme of things. And it may be that we've even taken rebirth during the time of a Buddha's dispensation, but we might not hear about it or care about it. We might just think, oh, it's just another thing we don't want to get interested in. So somehow, whether it's by our karma or by some other circumstance, we've become interested in the Buddha's teaching, which is also really amazing if we think about it. Like, why is that? Why this? Why not something else? Somehow we've seen that it's of practical benefit to ourselves, or there is truth to it. When we read the suttas, we have this feeling, or almost like we're following a scent, or tracking a rare animal. It's like there's an intuitive sense that there's something here, there's something to this. That faith, that first spark of faith starts to get kindled. And it's special because it's not just based on a blind faith, but there is a real feeling like there really is something to this. There really is something true about this. And when the Buddha says that it's certain that everybody will die, that's really true. That's a bold and true statement. When the Buddha says there is suffering, that's really, that the Four Noble Truths are really unique to Buddhism and to the Buddha's teaching. There is suffering, and it comes from somewhere. It comes from a cause. Tanha, bhava tanha, vibhava tanha, kama tanha. So it has a cause. It has a cessation. There's a path leading to the cessation. So it's rare to be reborn as a human being, and it's rare to be reborn in the time of a Sammasambuddha's dispensation, and it's rare to take interest. So we may have been reborn at the right time, but then take no interest, or even might even feel irritated by it, or aversion toward it. But we've taken that interest, but then even if we took interest, it might just be a passing curiosity or an academic interest in the Dhamma teaching. Yet somehow we've taken an interest in the way of practice, actually wanting to practice. Actually seeing, acknowledging, wow, these teachings are actually there to be put into practice. They're there to be, the Buddha said, make a effort to understand. So that's not to belittle an academic approach, which we might have that approach in order to make the effort to understand. And that's one type, that's also part and parcel of practice. But then that integrated approach, the integrated lifestyle, right speech, right action, right thought, that goes beyond the academic. Right livelihood, and right effort. Right mindfulness, right concentration, the meditation, the bhavana, chitta bhavana, the mental cultivation. Anytime we see suffering arise in the mind, that chitta bhavana, that's where we look at that and examine, see what's causing it, whether it's a lack of patience, a lack of mindfulness. So we have that inspiration or that intention to actually practice, actually do the training. And we start to find that it's difficult and it's work. This is a training which entails work and effort and mindfulness and a sense of intense patience, immense patience, vast patience. But we have this form of practice, the form of the 8 precepts, the form that we follow in the monastery. So we've got this form. This is an upaya, so skillful means. And we find that it's difficult. We still have our bodies and minds to deal with, and the defilements, the habits of mind, the habits of craving that we take into this practice, the habits of self, the habits of identification. So we start to call that into question and look at that, investigate that. There's all these different words in Thai for investigate. Picharana is like to contemplate. But then there's other words like considering, coming at from different angles. And then sometimes it entails going against what we might want, or how we might think we have to, what craving might tell us we need something or we have to do something or something is going to be good for us, we start to see that oh, well, that's in the past, that's harmed us. We have this internal conversation going on. Well, in the past when I did that, that brought suffering and harm to myself and others, so do I need that? Do I need to do that? Or should I practice that restraint? That's the higher sila, the higher virtues, sangbara sila, the sense restraint, and the sila that comes about from restraint. We hear the word restraint. It's actually not such a good translation for sangwara. Sangwara, maybe a better translation is composure, sense composure, composure of the faculties, composure of the sense faculties. Sangwara sila. That goes part and parcel with the citta bhavana. It's something that we bring into being, something that we create, something that we do. So it's not restraint in the sense of, like the image I might get when I hear the word restraint is somebody being restrained, somebody being held down, struggling and being held down, or being tied up. So that's the kind of restraint that would lead to pain and agony. But sangwara is the blamelessness, when you reflect on that kind of conduct, that been composing the faculties, using our body and mind in a skillful way, then we can reflect on that and experience joy, experience happiness. So the Buddha called that the bliss of blamelessness. And it kind of can seem like a small thing too when we take the 8 precepts, or the 5 precepts for that matter. And we might feel like, oh, it's kind of weird to be reciting these things. But those precepts, what they actually are, what it's creating is incredibly good, incredibly skillful. And they're very simple, and we take them, we recite them. But to take them formally is actually quite a profound act, and not at all common in the world. So that's also practice. That's also citta bhavana. Not losing our temper is citta bhavana. When we feel upset, irritated, aversive, angry, and then using that sangwara sila, that sense composure, to keep it from exiting out, keep it from going out the body or the speech in our actions or our speech. Reflecting on it with mindfulness. When we reflect with it on mindfulness, it's not repression. It's not the same. Because we start to gain insight into it and see the suffering of it. Oh, if I was to speak or to act on that, that would be dukkha. That would cause dukkha for myself and others. So when we reflect on it that way, then we're able to release it and let it go. And then it's not repression. That also means not directing it toward ourselves. So we might feel irritated, angry, or whatever, and it might not come out toward somebody else, but then it comes out toward ourselves. So that's just causing more torment, causing suffering for ourselves. We might even think that somehow it's good to make ourselves suffer. We're using up our bad karma from the past. So that's a subtle, insidious wrong view that can get in. It is good to feel joy that's not connected with sensuality, the joy of blamelessness, the joy that is connected with the citta bhavana, the joy of samadhi, the joy of giving. The joy that comes from using the optimum human rebirth in the best way possible, the most skillful way possible. That's worthy of joy. So it's worth thinking about, contemplating, what can we do to make our life as meaningful as possible. We have that intuitive sense. It's not through sensuality. We've already been there, done that. That kama tanha, the craving, the sense desire, it's going to come up again and again because it's a habit. But we already see that that's not the way. That's an endless cycle. It doesn't bring any lasting satisfaction. So we start to see, well, what if we could do it? What if we could let go of craving? What if we could actually do this? Then we practice, cultivate. Over the months, over the years, and the faith starts to get stronger. There's that idea, well, maybe this is really possible. Maybe it is actually possible to let go of craving. But it takes determination and courage and patience. But it's very important to have that thought if we really want to come and practice. Really important to have that thought. Maybe it is possible. Even I could do it. Maybe it is possible to let go of craving and stop suffering and have joy and be at ease. So this kind of almost funny teaching of Ajahn Chah said, why do we practice so hard for years and years and years, and the only reason we're doing it is so we can be at ease. After years, decades of practice, finally we can be at ease. Just to be at ease, just to stop suffering. Because we're never, if there's still craving there, we're never really at ease. There's this idea, I've had this idea so many times that I just want to rest, I just want to take a rest. But there's no rest. If craving is still there, there's no rest. Okay, well, maybe I can't be enlightened. At least I could just be reborn as a deva and just get a rest. Just hang out in bliss for a while. But even then, even those realms are impermanent. So what do we do? So planting that thought in the mind, how much suffering is enough? How many more times do I want to do this? So it's good to think about that, take that as a theme, take the opportunity, optimum human rebirth, being reborn in the time of a Buddhasasana, actually having faith that it's to be followed, actually deciding to practice. All these things are rare in the world. It goes on after that for those who actually take the practice and then go further and actually ordain, for those who are ordained, it's rare and difficult to actually find contentment and happiness in the ordained life. So to actually practice to the point where we feel a modicum of happiness and we get into a sense of, we can do this. This is sustainable. So that's also rare and difficult to do. And what is rare for a monastic who has attained a sense of happiness in the monastic form, even then you can get into cruise control and not go further, so then it's rare to practice Dhamma according to Dhamma. So take it even further and say what else needs to be developed, what else needs to be cultivated, what else needs to be let go of, and developing deeper, vaster patience, taking it further, not giving up on the chanting and the meditation and the sweeping and the daily schedule and the development of all these spiritual qualities. So taking it further, because it's not really about happiness. That was something interesting that when I don't know how many people here would know who Ruth Dennison is, but she was a real pioneer in taking the Dhamma to America, and very eccentric, but also a very vigorous and amazing Dhamma teacher. And I remember Longpor and a few others went to visit her. Debbie went to visit Ruth Dennison when she was dying. And she also had some dementia, but she had that well-established mindfulness, so she could actually tell people when it was coming on or when she was going to be in her dementia state. She actually had mindfulness around it. But one of the things she said was, they were just talking and chatting with her, and she said, people have to realize it's not about happiness. People have to realize it's not about happiness. It's so much more than that. So she really saw that. She really had, that was very genuine Dhamma knowledge, Dhamma insight. Because happiness is great. It's happiness. It's good, but it's still within the realm of the impermanent. So we're trying to look for that transcendent aspect. So practicing Dhamma according to Dhamma means really looking into the Satipatthana, the mindfulness, anatta, the anatta teaching. Without anatta, it's not going to be possible. So the Buddha teaches that anatta insight, is the not self insight, is so important for the getting to the transcendent. So it's rare for one who attains to a sense of happiness in the monastic form. It's still difficult. There is that difficulty of practicing Dhamma according to Dhamma and seeing through that. This sutta where there's the questioner asking what is rare, what is difficult to do for each of these stages of things. What is difficult to do for one who practices Dhamma according to Dhamma. And the Buddha says, well, at that point, Nibbana is near. So these are just some good reflections and recollections, and just to acknowledge that we're connected to something which is rare in the world and which has true benefit, brings true benefit. So hopefully this recollection of it can help that saddha to grow and blossom even more and help us to cultivate the citta bhavana and dive deep into the practice without holding back. I'll leave that for reflection this evening.